A HMO can generate 2 to 3 times the returns of a standard buy-to-let in exactly the same property. Sounds too good to be true, right? But it's not. But there's a lot more work involved. So in this video, I'm breaking down everything you need to know about HMO investing, what they actually are, the compliance, and the numbers, and importantly, how to pick the right area to invest into. Let's dive into it. Hi guys, my name's Jim and I'm a property investor based in the north of England. I currently focus on buy-to-lets and HMOs. My goal is to actually own 50 HMOs, and I'm doing it by partnering with investors who want returns without the day-to-day hassle. And on this channel, I'm sharing absolutely everything I've learned, from real projects to real numbers. So whether you want to invest yourself or partner with someone like me, you'll know exactly how it works. And if you're new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button because I'll be dropping property investing content every single week. So let's start with the absolute basics. What actually is a HMO? HMO stands for House in Multiple Occupation. In simple terms, it's a property where 3 or more unrelated tenants are living together and sharing facilities, such as a kitchen or a bathroom. Now, before we go any further, I need to talk about something really important, which is use classes. Every property in England has a use class. It's basically what the property is legally allowed to be used for. The key ones we're interested in are C3, C4, and sui generis. A C3 dwelling is a single household, a family home. A C4 is a small house of multiple occupation, up to 6 people sharing. And sui generis is for larger HMOs, 7 or more people. It's a separate use class that always requires planning permission regardless of where it is. And here's something which catches people out all the time. It's based on the number of people, not just the number of bedrooms. So if you've got 6 bedrooms but you're renting to 8 people, that's sui generis. So you'd need full planning permission for that. Now, I know we've jumped straight into the technical stuff, but ultimately that's why you're here, because you want some value. And this is the valuable stuff. When you convert a property from C3 to C4, you might need planning permission. It depends on your location and your local council. And if you're going for 7 people or more, then that's sui generis and you'll 100% need planning permission. Now, this is where Article 4 and permitted development rights come into play. Normally, you have something called permitted development rights. That means you can convert a C3 family home to a C4 without needing planning permission. But some councils have removed these permitted development rights by putting an Article 4 directive in. And that's what it is. It's a planning restriction. It means even small HMOs up to 6 beds need planning permission before you can operate them. Now, not every area has Article 4, but large cities like Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, and Nottingham all do. And I've actually got a full breakdown video breaking down Article 4 in detail. So if you want to see that, I'll link it in the description below. But here's the main thing you need to understand. A HMO is rented out by the room, not by the whole property. So instead of one family paying, let's say, £800 a month for the whole house, you've got 6 tenants, each paying £500 a month for their own individual room. That gives you £3,000 a month for the same property. Now, that's the fundamental difference, and it's why the cash flow is so much higher. So now you know what a HMO is, but why do they really work so well? And why are so many investors, including myself, focused on this strategy? Well, I think there's 4 main reasons. Number 1 is cash flow. HMOs typically generate 2 to 3 times, sometimes even more, than a standard buy-to-let. Let me give you a real example from my own portfolio. So we've got a buy-to-let that we rent out for £750 a month, and we've got a 6-bed HMO, and those rooms rent out from £650 all the way up to £725. That HMO generates £4,100 a month. So we're talking £750 compared with £4,100 a month. That's over 5 times the rental income. Number 2, you can spread your risk. With a buy-to-let, if one tenant moves out, your income drops to 0 overnight. With a HMO, if one of your 6 tenants moves out, you've still got income coming from the other 5 rooms. You're not relying on a single household. Number 3 is demand. There's massive demand for HMO rooms across the UK. Students need them, young professionals need them, key workers like nurses, teachers, doctors, and engineers all need these rooms. In most cities, the demand far outweighs the supply, which means you can keep these properties full all year round. And number 4, this is a bit of a bonus pro. You can force the values up by getting commercial valuations. Now, this typically applies to 6 beds and above, or if you're doing a sui generis HMO with all en suites and studios. When you convert a standard house into a larger HMO, maybe by adding extra bedrooms, all en suites, and improving the layout, you're massively increasing the rental income. And with commercial valuations, that increased rental income directly increases your property's valuation. We'll talk more about exactly how valuations work a little bit later in this video, but this can help you refinance and pull your capital back out to reinvest. Now, word of caution here, you need to be careful about not over leveraging with these commercial valuations. Yes, you can recycle your capital, but you still need to manage your debt sensibly. Don't get greedy. This is also why HMOs work so well for joint venture partnerships. When you can offer an investor consistent monthly income with a fair profit sharing and show them how that capital can be recycled after refinancing, it becomes a very attractive proposition. And if you're someone who's interested in partnering on HMO projects, I've got a link in the description to join my investor waitlist. Fill the form in and let's have a conversation to see if it's going to work for both of us. Alright, so HMOs aren't created equal. There's actually difference in sizes, and understanding which one suits your goals is really important. So let me break down the main categories based on the number of bedrooms. First up, you've got mini HMOs. That's typically 3 to 4 beds. These are ideal if you're just starting out because there's fewer regulations to deal with. Depending on your area, you might not even need a license. They're generally easier to manage, but obviously the cash flow is lower than larger HMOs. Now for these smaller HMOs, your 3, 4 and 5 beds, they normally get valued on a bricks and mortar valuation, not a commercial. So typically you might leave more money in these deals, but the cash flow is still higher and better than a buy to let. So your return on capital employed might actually be higher. Next, large HMOs, 6 beds or more. This is where licensing becomes mandatory across the UK. You'll need to meet stricter safety standards, but the cash flow is significantly higher. And this is where you can start getting commercial valuations, which means you can refinance and pull more capital back out. This is the sweet spot for most serious HMO investors in my opinion. So that's the size breakdown. Now let's talk about who's actually going to live in these properties. Now I think there's 3 main tenant profiles you need to understand. First off, student HMOs. These are properties rented to university students, usually on a 12-month contract that runs September to September. This demand is very predictable. Students need housing every single year, but you do get a higher turnover and sometimes there's more wear and tear. Typically you're dealing with parental guarantors as well. Next up, my personal favorite, professional HMOs. These are rented to young professionals, people in their 20s and 30s who are working full time. Generally you get longer tenancies and less hassle, and normally these tenants look after the property a little bit better compared to students. And you can also achieve higher rents because the professionals are willing to pay more for quality. And finally, supported living or social housing HMOs. These are properties for vulnerable people who need some level of care or support. Now sometimes the yields on these can be pretty incredible, and you typically hand these over to a management agent, a local authority or care provider. Now it is worth mentioning you need to be really careful about the finance for these type of deals. Having the right broker is absolutely key, because not all lenders will lend on social housing HMOs. So if you're going down this route, make sure you're working with a specialist who understands the space. So depending on where you are in your investing journey and what level of involvement you want, there's a tenant profile and a HMO size that fits you. Now let's talk about everyone's favorite subject, compliance, because this is where lots of people get nervous. I certainly did. But honestly, if you understand what's required, it's not as scary as it sounds. First thing, licensing. If you're running a HMO with 5 or more tenants from 2 or more households, you need a mandatory HMO license, and that's the law across England. But some councils also have what's called additional licensing, which means even smaller HMOs, 3 or 4 beds, need a license in certain areas as well. You need to check your specific council if this applies. Licenses typically last 5 years and cost anywhere from £500 to £1,500. And as part of your licensing, you'll normally need a fire risk assessment as well. So at the start of your HMO project, it's always worth engaging with a fire risk assessor to make sure you can meet all of the guidance before you start spending money on the conversion, because it's easier to do all this stuff up front. Which leads me on to the next point around fire safety. Now this is taken very seriously with HMOs. Rightfully so. You need to follow something called the Le Corps guidelines. I can never say that correct. That means fire doors in every room, interconnected smoke alarms throughout the property. And depending on the layout and size, you might need emergency lighting in the hallways and escape routes. Now if you're doing a full back to brick refurb, building control will also need to sign your project off, particularly when it comes to fire rated plasterboard. They'll want to make sure you're meeting all the up-to-date building regulations for fire safety. And those fire doors will need signing off by your HMO licenser. So you need to have the right certificates proving they've been installed correctly. There's no getting around this. This isn't optional, and the fire service can come out and inspect your property, and if you're not compliant, you're in serious trouble and it's going to take loads of time and money to fix it. Next up, room sizes. There's minimum room sizes and there's a national HMO guidance document that most councils follow. It typically states bedrooms need to be 6.51 square meters for a single occupant. But here's what really matters. You need to get in the specifics of your local council's HMO guidance document, because this is the most important thing for you getting your license. Every council publishes their own standards, and this can be different from council to council. Some councils have stricter requirements than others, and some have specific rules about ensuite sizes. And when they come around for your license inspection, they will measure up your rooms and your ensuites to make sure the sizes meet the guidance documents. So never assume. Download your local council's HMO standards document and follow it to the letter. Here's the other important thing. Depending on your target tenant profile, you want to exceed these minimum requirements. If you go for the absolute minimum on room sizes, they're absolutely tiny. So for our HMOs, for professionals, our room sizes are typically 14 square meters. Because if you're targeting professionals, they just won't accept tiny rooms. They want quality and they want space. Maybe for students or social housing, smaller rooms will be acceptable. But again, understanding your tenant profile really early is key here. Don't just build to the minimum and expect premium rents. And here's something else which catches people out all the time. Planning permission and licensing are two completely separate things. They are dealt with by two completely different departments in the council. Just because you get planning permission, it doesn't mean you'll get a license, and vice versa. Depending on the size of your HMO, you need both. So never assume one covers the other. Another little tip, some councils offer paid plan reviews before you submit your full application. So for a few £100, they'll look at your plans and tell you if there's any issues. Personally, I think it's worth doing as it saves you months of back and forth after you've spent money on architects and builders already. I know this sounds like a lot of boxes to tick, but here's the key thing. Yes, there's more regulation than standard buy-to-let. That's an understatement. But that's exactly why HMOs are less competitive and more profitable. Most landlords just can't be arsed with all the compliance, which means better deals and better returns for those of us willing to do the work. Now let's talk money, because understanding costs and more importantly, how valuations work is absolutely crucial if you want to scale with HMOs. First up, let's break down the fees and costs you're looking at. Your HMO license is going to be £500 to £1,500 depending on your local council. And if you need a full planning application, that's around £460 for the application. But you might also want to pay for an architect or a planning consultant to help with this. And their fees can range up to a couple of grand. And obviously you're going to have to wait a long time for this, because I'm not sure if you're aware, but planning in the UK takes an age, normally 12 to 24 months. After that, you've then got your refurb and your compliance cost. Fire doors, electrical works, en-suites if you're adding them, furniture, gas and electric certificates. This can range from anywhere from a couple of £1,000 all the way up to like £50,000 or £60,000 for mid-range projects. Now this is really a range. It could be 10 grand on one project, it could be 50 or 60,000 for maybe a mid-sized project. But if you're doing a full back-to-brick conversion on a larger property, something like a 13-bed HMO, it could be all the way up to a couple of £100,000. Now I actually recently filmed a video with investor Ollie Walsh who converted a care home into a 13-bed HMO. So if you want to see what the finished product looks like, I'll link that video in the description below. It's a great example of a full back-to-brick HMO conversion. Now generally your running costs are higher than a buy-to-let and a HMO as well. You're paying the utilities as the landlord. So that's gas, electric, water and internet. And you're probably going to have more maintenance as well because there's more wear and tear just to the number of people in the property. And if you're using a letting agent, their fees tend to be higher for HMOs as well. Another important thing, you want to get communal cleaners to go to the property every 2 weeks to clean the hallways and the kitchen. All of this needs to be factored into your numbers. And then you've got your professional fees, architects, HMO consultants and building control. These can all add several £1,000s to your property project, but they're necessary if you want to do things right. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Valuation. Understanding how HMOs are valued is key to making this strategy work, especially if you want to refinance and recycle your capital. Now there's two main valuation methods. First is a bricks and mortar method, which is what you'd use for a normal house. The surveyor looks at what similar properties have sold for in the area and values your property based on that. But the second method, and this is the one that matters for larger HMOs, is the commercial valuation method, also called the yield method. This is based on rental income, not comparable sales. And here's how it works. Let's say your HMO generates £36,000 a year, and the surveyor looks at the local market and decides that a HMO in your area would typically sell at an 8% yield. You then take your annual rent, £36,000, and divide it by your 8% yield. And that would give you a valuation of £450,000. Now if you're in an Article 4 area where HMOs are restricted, surveyors often use an even lower yield, maybe 7 or even 6%, because there's less competition and higher demand. So that same £36,000 of rent with a 6% yield, that's a £600,000 valuation. So commercial valuations can be really powerful when you're scaling your HMO portfolio. Now a quick word on company structure, because this is something you'll want to think about early on, especially if you're planning to scale up. Most investors, including myself, operate through a limited company structure rather than buying properties in their personal name. Now there's a few reasons for this. Number one, tax efficiency. With a limited company, you're paying corporation tax on your profits, which is currently 19%, rather than income tax, which could be all the way up to 45%. You've got more flexibility with how you extract money as well. Salary, dividends, and retained profits. It's just a more efficient way of running multiple properties. Number two, joint venture structures are a lot cleaner in limited companies. If you're bringing in investors, you can issue shares, you can set up a profit sharing agreement, and you can have multiple directors. It's all so much easier to manage than trying to do it personally. And number 3, separate liability. The company is its own separate legal entity. If something goes wrong with your business, your personal assets are protected. So there's a layer of separation there. Now, I'm not a tax advisor or an accountant, so absolutely you need to speak to specialist property accountants before setting anything up. Because ultimately, everyone's situation is different. But I can tell you, working with the right accountants who understands property has been one of the best investments I've made so far. They'll help you structure things properly from day one. And finally, let's talk about choosing the right area to invest in. Because honestly, this is the most overlooked step. You can do everything else right, but if you pick the wrong location, your HMO is always going to struggle. So when I research an area, I'm looking out for a few key things. First off the bat, strong tenant demand. Where are the students? Where are the hospitals and key workers? Where are the business parks and young professionals working? You want to be near all these demand drivers. Second, good rent to price ratios. There's no point buying in an expensive area where your yield is going to be 4 or 5%. You want areas where property prices are affordable but rents are still strong. Those locations are where you make your money. Third up, infrastructure and transport links. Is there a train station, bus routes? Can your tenants easily get to work? Think about who's going to be living there and what they need. Now here's some practical due diligence steps I do in every area. First, I check the local HMO register. Most councils publish a list of all the licensed HMOs in their area. Now this is absolute gold dust, because it shows you where all the investors have already succeeded, where there's demand, and what streets are HMO heavy. So you'll get a feel for which locations within your area are HMO locations. Next up, use Article 4 map. Now this is a paid tool, I think it's a couple of quid a month. That shows you exactly where Article 4 restrictions apply. You can overlay this onto Google Maps and see which postcodes are restricted and which are open. Now this is going to save you so much time, because you can rule out areas immediately if they're too restricted. And finally, my favorites, I'll check the planning portal for your local council. I'll look at recent planning applications for HMO conversions, and keep a track of how many are getting approved and how many are getting rejected, and what kind of room layouts are they accepting. This will give you a feel whether the council is HMO friendly or if they're clamping down on it. So definitely don't skip this step. The area you choose will make or break your HMO business. So that's HMO basics. What they are, why they work, the different sizes and tenant profiles, compliance, cost and valuations, company structure, and how to choose the right area. If you're thinking about getting into HMO investing, you now have a solid foundation to build from. So if you found this video useful, make sure you subscribe to the channel and sign up to my free email newsletter in the description. I send real deal breakdowns and actual numbers from my projects, and all the lessons I'm learning as I scale to 50 HMOs. And don't forget to check out the 13-bed tour with investor Ollie Walsh as well. See you in the next one.